Hello and welcome to another episode of Mean Brews. I'm Matthew Harold. Today we're going to cover American Lager. Let's get right into the data. I found 25 American Lager recipes. There was one that was best of show, 22 gold, 1 silver, 0 bronze, and one that was old and award-winning. Didn't say what medal it got. The recipes dated all the way back to 1985 up to 2023 with a bias towards later years. The BJCP style is 1B, a very pale, highly carbonated, light-bodied, and well-attenuated lager with a very neutral flavor profile and low bitterness. Served very cold, it could be a very refreshing and thirst-quenching drink. When I looked at the stability over time, surprisingly a little bit of evolution here, more than I expected actually. But the variation between the recipes was very minimal. Original gravity ranged between 1.040 to 1.059, well above the max, almost 10 points over the max. The average was 1.047, so on the high side of the range, and my recipe will be right on that average. Final gravity, again on the high side of the BJCP range. The average was 1.010. My yeast and my mash profile and fermentation profile is going to bring that a little bit lower than the mean. IBUs, the BJCP range is low and pretty tight, between 8 and 18. The recipes that I saw that won had anywhere between 10 and 26 IBUs. So if you look at this area here, almost half the recipes exceeded the IBU range for the style. The average was 16, and I'm going to be on that average, so there's no evolution happening with IBUs. BJCP color, very hard for me, being colorblind, to be able to tell the differences between 2, 3, and 4. They're very gradual changes in shade of yellow to golden. The range for BJCP is 2 to 3.5 with an average of 2.9 SRM or 5.7 EBC. None of the beers strayed outside the BJCP range. I'm going to be on the high side just based upon the malts that I chose. And we are seeing an increase with a very good correlation coefficient here, Pearson's coefficient, showing that the color for this style is increasing over time. For the malt percentages, the averages of all recipes was 80% base malt, just under 20% adjunct, and a little bit, 1.4% of crystal. No toast, no roast, no other malts. Distribution of malts used, 100% of the recipes used base malt, between 60 and 100% of the grist. Right about 85% used an adjunct. So these are your flaked malts, your simple sugars. Between 10 and 38% of the grist. And then just about a third of the recipes used crystal malts, at a very small proportion of the grist, less than 10%. I'm going to be right at 75% for base malt. When you zoom in on the crystals, we just talked about this, so I won't repeat it. I'm going to be a little bit higher, so 75-25 is my ratio of base malts to adjuncts, and I'm not going to use any crystals. And the reason why is nobody's using them anymore. So it's just the trend is very good, 0.45, trending down to nothing, basically, use of crystal malts. Types of base malts used. So we'll go over the top ones here. About 45, almost 50% used American 2-row. Just under that, about 35% used either Pilsner or Vienna. Pilsner or 6-row, American 6-row malt. If you don't know what 6-row is, it's a different type of barley where 6 kernels grow through a cross section through the grain, and it has a higher diastatic power. So traditionally 6-row is used to allow conversion of all the adjuncts that American lagers used. Today's 2-row malt has a very high diastatic power, and you don't need to use 6-row. 6-row has been described as being a bit harsh. I have not seen that, but that's the history behind the 2 and 6-row. Next most common, Vienna, wheat, and Munich have been used in very few recipes. My recipe will be using 75% two-row malt. We're seeing a decrease, pretty good correlation here, showing a decrease in the use of 6-row, and I think that's based upon what I was just talking about, the two-row having more and more diastatic power, and the need to not use a 6-row malt is just there in today's well-modified and well-powerful two-row malts that you can purchase today. Crystal malts, the only crystal malts used was Carapils in about a quarter of the recipes, and then one recipe used a light crystal or Cara Vienna. Anywhere between 2 to 9% of the grist. If you want to use a Carapils, 5% seem to be the average. I'm not going to use crystal malt in my recipe. All right, this is where it gets interesting. The adjuncts were split 50-50 between a corn product or rice product. And the rice products were split, 2/3 flaked rice or minute rice or steamed rice or gelatinized rice, and 1/3 of that half was rice syrup solids. So very difficult to say which way you're going to go, right? You're either going to go flaked corn or flaked rice. There are commercial examples out there, I won't name them, where they use all corn or all rice in very, very large proportions of the grain bill, but it was split 50-50. There was really no way to choose which way to go here. For my recipe, I'll be using 15% flaked corn and 10% flaked rice. And the reason is, I'm gonna walk through the adjunct story here in a second. The use of adjuncts is increasing over time, very good correlation, to 25% of the grist. And that's why I'm at 75-25 for my recipe. Also, when you look at the use of rice and the use of corn, they both are increasing. The correlation on corn is much higher than the correlation on rice. So the percentage of the grist, the percentage of recipes that use corn versus rice is increasing, and corn has a little bit better correlation. That's why I'm using 15-10 corn to rice. Flaked corn as a percentage of the grain bill. When you look at corn for all recipes used, whether they used it or not, you see an increase. If you look corn for only those recipes that use corn, how much did they use? You see it decreasing to around 15%. Hey, that's what I chose. So if I used the average from the recipes, I'd use 20, but it's trending, it's almost, narrowing down, filtering down to 15% corn is what you want to use. The rice is there. Rice doesn't really contribute much flavor, if any at all. It's just there to lighten the beer. It's almost 100% fermentable. And you need that in this style to get it to dry out as much as you can. Corn does, in my opinion, offer some corn type flavors, and 15% from the data appears to be the sweet spot here. All right, now on to the least important part of this beer, bittering hops. We had 13% or 13 different bittering hops used, with Howler Mittelfrüh being the most prominent. And that's what I will be using for this recipe, is Mittelfrüh. Flavor hops, we had 6 flavor hops used, Mittelfrüh, Satz, German styles, really noble style hops here. I'll not be using a flavor hop addition. Aroma hops, again, dominated either by a noble hop or one of the American clones. I love Liberty, if you've never used it. Liberty's American, similar to the noble styles from Germany. I'll be using, again, Mittelfrüh, it's the most used, and it's what I'm using to bitter with. So rate of hop additions, probably wondering why I'm not using flavor hops. Well, I'll show you in a second. The average for 44% of recipes used a flavor hop addition, so anywhere between 10 and 20 minute addition, at an average of 0.08 ounce per gallon or 0.6 grams per liter. That's not a lot. 40%, a little bit under that, used an aroma hop, an average of 0.1 ounce per gallon, so a little bit higher hop rate, or 0.75 grams per liter. The range here is pretty substantial. So more than some recipes use double that. I'm not recommending that. I'm not seeing any trends. Well, let's say that. Let's see in a second. I'm not using the flavor hop addition, and I'm going to use right on the average for the aroma. If you're looking at recipes that used percentage of recipes that used flavor hops and percentage of recipes that used aroma hops, you're seeing flavor hops just dropping off and aroma, very, very late addition hops just becoming more and more prominent. So that's why I chose to use aroma hops in this style. Mash type, 4 different mash types used. Single infusion, almost 2/3 of the recipes use a single infusion. 25% use a step mash, 10% decoction, and one recipe just ramped from protein rest all the way to diastatic very slowly, or saccharification rest very slowly. I think if you use a under-modified malt, you probably might need to do this. So some of the earlier 6 rows probably use these step mashes and decoctions. I'll be using a single infusion mash. Looking at the temperatures that people were holding these at, protein rest the average was 124 Fahrenheit or 51 Celsius for an average of 24 minutes, and the range here was pretty narrow. And then the beta rest was 146 Fahrenheit or 63 Celsius for an average of 68 minutes, long beta rest. And then the alpha rest was 152 Fahrenheit or 67 Celsius for 60 minutes. Let's see here. I'm going to be at around 150 is the temperature I'm going to be holding for an hour. And the reason is I looked at just the infusion recipes. You know, this data above shows all the step mashes and decoctions. And for just the infusion recipes, the average was 150 Fahrenheit or 66 Celsius for 75 minutes. So I'll be following these guidelines here for my recipe. Looking at, I know I'm not doing a protein rest, but we are seeing an increase in temperature and an increase in duration for a protein rest. Doesn't really make much sense for me, but if you are going to do a protein rest, shoot for about 125 for 30 minutes. I'm not going to recommend that for this style though. Boil duration was anywhere between 60 and 90 with an average of 70 minutes, and I'm going to be right on that average. Yeast used, pretty much all lager yeast, White Labs 840, Y Yeast 2007, which is supposed to be the Budweiser strain, was the most prominent. 3470, 838 was very prominent as well. Have your pick here. I mean, if you use more corn, you can use a Modelo, right? Probably be very delicious in this style, but I'm going to stick with the 840 because that's what the data is showing me, and that's what Meanbrews is all about. And the use of 840, sorry for this text here, pretty good correlation showing almost half the recipes nowadays are using this yeast strain for this style. Water chemistry, 46 calcium, 4 magnesium, 5 sodium, 37 sulfate, and 59 chloride. I'm going to be, I think, right on that, exactly on the means for the water chemistry. Fermentation temperatures, I had a chat with a buddy of mine. A lot of these old lager recipes, and talking about the ones in the 80s and early 90s, they are fermenting, primary fermentation in the mid to high 30s for weeks. I find that very interesting. I don't think it's necessary, but I really would like to see how that changes a beer. Maybe we'll do a brewlosophy on that, see if we can even get one strain to do that type of a fermentation. But anyway, the average fermentation temperature is right at 49. The yeast strain 840, which is what we're using, was right there. Very narrow band, 48 to 50. 838 is the one that was fermented at 38 to 48. So it could take it cold. Would love to see brewlosophy cover that, see if they can get it to ferment 38 versus normal lagering temperatures and tell a difference. Average was 49 there. Lager duration, anywhere between 14 and 119 days. What I found interesting, I'm going to be at 21. What I found interesting is this lager duration is just normalized here, it's stabilized here at 3 weeks. So this is a beer that takes 3 weeks to lager and get a good award-winning product. Average carbonation volumes was 2.64, a little bit high. Mash pH was 5.3. All right, here's the Meanbrews recipe. 75% two-row, American two-row, 15% flake corn, 10% rice. Can be flaked rice, you can even use rice syrup solids. You're really getting it to dry out the beer. We're going to add 14 IBUs of middle fruit with 60 minutes, and we're going to add 0.09 ounce per gallon or 0.67 grams per liter of aroma hops middle fruit at 5 minutes. And we're going to use either White Labs 840, Yeast 2007, or OYL 102. Omega Yeast Labs 102 are supposedly the same strain. Water chemistry, we just went over OG 1.047, 16 IBUs. Mash pH 5.3, so adjust with your favorite acid or acid malt. Infusion mash of 150 Fahrenheit or 66 Celsius for 75 minutes. We're gonna boil it for 70 minutes as per the data. Chill to 48 Fahrenheit or 9 Celsius, and we're gonna pitch. That's not Whitbread dry. Sorry, I missed that. We're gonna pitch 840, 2-liter starter for a 5 gallon batch. I know it's low gravity. This is a lager. You want a high yeast count. We're going to ferment for 7 days, rise to do a diacetyl rest, and hold for another 5 days. Again, if your fermentation, if you got a tilt and you see it start to plane out, raise the temperature then. Don't wait the 7 days. Usually do it what I call the knee in the curve, right? So you have an S curve that comes down. When it starts flattening out, raise the temperature. That way you can get the yeast while it's still active to eat up the diacetyl and its precursors. Slowly ramp down to 32 or 0 Celsius over 17 days, 2 degrees Fahrenheit per day. Lager for 3 weeks, and then bottle or keg, and go win a competition with it. Serve it 2.6 volumes of CO2. Well, that's it for today's video. Don't really know right now what style I'm going to cover next, but I will put it in the comments, so make sure and check that out. And until then, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.